Welcome to Break the Silence, Build the Future, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of survivors and advocates while shedding light on the pervasive issue of gender based violence. Join us on a journey where survivors find strength in sharing their stories and experts offer profound insight into this critical societal issue. It's quite difficult to understand court process or how the steps move until you are in it, including myself. I had no idea, I had no appreciation what goes on in the court process when somebody is either a victim or a family who had lost somebody to a violent crime or involved in a violent crime. The process is extremely slow, very confusing, and very foreign. Very slow because the man who's accused of murdering my daughter had been arrested June 5th, 2023. And we're in June now. And we're just wrapping up the preliminary hearing, which was 5 days that was scheduled. And all the preliminary hearing does is when he was first arrested, he was charged with first degree murder. But in the preliminary hearing, the judge will hear the evidence prosecutors have and what the defense say about those evidence pieces, witnesses, and the judge will decide what level of murder charge can be justified using this evidence, right? So looking at the evidence, what level of charge can be justified, can be used to bring a trial by using this particular evidence. So 5 days was scheduled, we were told, but before we arrived at those 5 days, there was 6 or 7 or 8 for virtual court dates that were only spent on the same thing. Does this person have a lawyer? When is this person going to get a lawyer? Some days, 4 6 weeks apart, were exactly the same thing. The person will come. Do you have a lawyer yet? No, we didn't speak to the lawyer. We spoke to the lawyer. We didn't speak to the lawyer. We spoke to the lawyer. It was like going in these circles without really knowing. And you have no knowledge of what is going to happen on any given day. You have no idea, no role as the family that lost a child in this process. Nothing. So we come in there, we hear what's said. Some days we log in, we take the day off work, we arrange all of our lives, which we're okay with to do because we want to be here for our loved Zahra. But you don't know what's going to happen. One day, it was all of 8 minutes. We got there, 2 3 things were said. It was 8 minutes. It was scheduled for 9:30. I was out of that room by 9:38. And I didn't, at those times, I don't even know half what I hear. There were some things that even though I was in the room that I didn't hear or absorb or process, that my daughter-in-law who was joining virtually told me, did you hear when they said this and when they said that? This is just the process before we arrived at the preliminary hearing. And we arrived at the preliminary hearing and we have 5 days. There might be a chance that myself and one of my sons be witness later on when the trial starts. Therefore, we could not go in the room and hear what is being said to protect the integrity of what we are going to say and have it without influence. And the family members who are going in are not allowed to talk to each other about it and are not allowed to talk to me. So just imagine every day of those 5 days. I mean, April 4th, 5th, the 9th, May the 8th, and May the 30th, I would take the day off work and sit there in the court hallway and just wait. And imagine what's being said there. Imagine what are some of the things that my children that are here are hearing that are traumatizing, things that their sister went through. And I'm just imagining, and I have no way of connecting with my children, debriefing with them, asking them what happened, talking about it, trying to dissect it, to understand it, to make some sense of it. We have no way of doing that. And I am, as their mother, feel like I am cut off and isolated from the whole thing. And I'm caught between these two, that I could have said to the prosecutor, I don't care, I don't want to testify, I want to be in here. But do I want to do that? Do I want to risk the chance of me adding something to this trial, or answering questions that I might be the only person that could answer that question? Right? So those are the things. So I decided I was going to stay out of the courtroom. I could have the opportunity to testify when the opportunity presents itself for me to testify. So that's where we are. And my children are hearing testimonies from everyday person or the medical personnel that can share some specific, and I have no way of connecting with my children. I have no way of figuring out what it is that happened there. So I could have a say, so I could console them, so I could do something about it. And that just devastates me to no end. So we were told these 5 days are scheduled to share the evidence, and the final day to to have the submission done by both sides. And I have, my daughter lives in Toronto, two of my children live in California, and my daughter lives in Chicago. So my children are coming from all over every time this happens. And it's not like 4 or 5 days that are lined together and they can take a week off work and they can deal with this. It's not like that. So we had April 4th and the 5th and the 9th. And remember, these are people that are working. They have their own bills, their own families, their own lives to tend to. But they also want to be here for me, and they want to be here for their sister. But that's not going to be taken into account when the court does its process. Okay, but we have a virtual line that other family members can join, but my children want to be there for their sister, want to be there for me. So they don't want to really join virtually, they want to be there physically. But at the same time, they have other work, other lives to tend to. So when we had May the 8th, which was the day 4 of the 5-day preliminary hearing, we were told that the 30th, we have 3 people testifying and the summation. We're going to be done with it, and then nobody knows how long the judge will take to give answer to the charge. But the idea was May the 30th, summation will be done, and the case will be in the judge's hand, done with the Crown prosecutor, done with the defense. So when we arrived on May the 30th, I ran into the prosecutor and I asked the prosecutor, how long do you think it would take the judge to make their decision? Would it be today? That day was Thursday. Would they be able to do it Friday before my children left? Would it take them a week or 2 or 3? I am asking this because in my mind, everything else will be done that day. Submission, last witnesses, last evidence, anything that needed to be done would be done that day. And we will only be waiting for the judge. That's why I'm asking this question. I'm trying to anticipate how long the judge would take to respond. And the Crown prosecutor looks at me and they say, actually, we're not going to do the submission today. We need more time to put everything together. While I appreciate the fact that the Crown wants to take more time to put their answers together, use everything that was done, take some time to put together, we weren't told that was a possibility. We had no idea, and we were so blindsided, I didn't even have an answer. My son was parking the car at the time, and when he came up and I told him, he was so upset. And when we asked the Crown, or the victim services, the answer was, if they can't make it, just have them join virtually. They don't have to come. They can join virtually. That's not a problem. Just join virtually. So that is such a dismissal about the challenges that the family is facing and the need for the family to be there for each other, to be there for their own comfort, to realize that they did all they could to stand up for their sister and to stand by their mother. But just to say, oh, they can just join virtually, they don't have to come. Of course, I know my children, if I told them you don't have to come, they're not going to listen. They say, I want to come. And they have the right to come. So my children have, like I said, they're adults, they have their jobs, they have their other lives. So when we heard we have another day in June, everybody had to scramble and try and rearrange their lives, their days, their events. If somebody was going to attend events day before or day after the day that we were told the court is scheduled, they have to change now. All my children have to rearrange whatever they were going to do that week to make it this day that was scheduled. Again, it was scheduled for June the 28th. Then you realize, you appreciate the level of disregard for the victims and their families. And then you will appreciate why some people, some women, when they are in crisis like this, they don't want to go to the police. They don't want to go to the court. They don't want to talk to anybody. Not only do you have to repeat this story over and over again, but there is this total disregard of your role in this problem. Even though you are the recipient of the violence, you are the recipient of this unsurmountable loss in my family's case. But your role in the system does not exist. There is the defender and the crown, and that's it. You could just appreciate the lack of support families get, the total disregard. And this has nothing to do with one particular prosecutor. This has nothing to do with one particular police officer or one particular police department or one particular victim services. It has nothing to do with any of that. This is a system set up to disregard victims. That's it. That there's no, the system itself works like that. It has no advocacy program. It has nobody that speaks for the family. Yes, victim services person will tell you when a court is scheduled. But that day when we walked in, we had no idea. And nobody took into account the impact these things will have to my family or any other family for that matter. And I just want you to think about that and begin to appreciate that hopefully you never end up here. I pray nobody ends up where I am and where my family is. But if you are, just imagine if somebody else is your next door neighbor, somebody in your city, appreciate the challenge. I think that's something we all together as Ontarians need to work on, understanding how the system doesn't really support victims and doesn't offer any kind of advocacy for the victims. That's very important for us to understand. So that is the first one. The second one is how slow it moves. Okay, it moves so slowly that we are told once this is done, the case will go to Ontario Superior Court. And in that Superior Court, there's a court called Scheduling Court. And it does only scheduling once a month. And it might be scheduling year out, 6 months out, 8 months out. and that court has to schedule what's known a pre-trial. I don't really know what happens in the pre-trial, but my basic understanding is this is where it's decided what evidence is allowed in and what evidence is not allowed in, what witnesses that are allowed in and what witnesses that are not allowed in. That's my basic understanding. So that could be, let's say, if the judge in our case makes their decision, let's say we finish the summation the end of June and nothing else pops up like it always does, and the judge takes until the end of July to make her decision, and this goes to the scheduling court in August, it might have to wait September scheduling day. So let's say it's scheduled for September, and let's say it's scheduled for April or March of 2025. And that is when, and I don't know how many days is scheduled for the pretrial, but let's say the pretrial is done sometime in May, and that pretrial decision comes back to the scheduling court. And the scheduling court again, let's say that comes back in June and of 2025, and that court, let's say, does the scheduling for July, and it might be scheduling year out, year and a half out. Okay, so we are in now July of 2025, and that's the best case scenario. I'm giving you the best case scenario. July of 2025, the court does the scheduling for the actual trial and jury selection. And if that's year out, we're looking at July of 2026. And I said that far out when somebody explained this to me in the courthouse as I was sitting there. And I said, that far out? And I was told yes. And I wouldn't be surprised if you hear 2027. Just think about that. 2027, my daughter was killed summer of 2023. So if we get to the summer of 2027, that's 4 years from the date. And they said 4 to 6 weeks at that time. So we have to be in court full day, 4 to 6 weeks. I'm already anxious about how my children would manage being here 4 to 6 weeks and leaving their entire life behind, their families, their children, their jobs, their lives, their schools. How would that be possible? How are we going to manage? So that's how slow the system moves. So it has total disregard on the victims, and it moves very slowly. You have no role in it. Okay, you have no role in what happens. So we were talking about this, and my daughter-in-law said, I think what we should do is from now on, walk into that court every day we can, every day that's scheduled, without expectations. We need to stop expectations altogether. We can't. We can't have any expectations at all. And I think that's where we are until we reach a time where there is a change in the system, at least for my family's sanity, at least for our well being. We are going to leave our trust in Allah and go into that court with no expectations.